Ori and the Blind Forest is a masterpiece. It has just about everything you could want in a game. The movement is fast and fluid, but with its own distinct identity. There's no fluff. There's just enough story to get you attached, only so it can make you weep like a baby 5 minutes later. The presentation is stunning, the audio, the visuals. Everything about this game is a stellar example of just how far the Metroidvania genre has come. Now, I'm as hyped for Metroid Dread as the next guy, but we can only pray that Nintendo has been taking notes on games like these for the past 20 years. Ori and the Will of the Wisps was given an impossible task that all sequels to great pieces of media are given. Do something like this, but different. How do you follow a game like this? How do you build on something that's already set the bar so high, creating something different without pissing off everyone who loved the first one? And the answer is, you add a grappling hook, you absolute fool. By some miracle, Ori and the Will of the Wisps lives up to and often even exceeds the expectations set by its predecessor. It seems pretty clear that in the 5 years since Ori originally came out, someone on the development team was keeping a close eye on the best games of the genre. The biggest addition here is a much heavier focus on combat. Ori is given a sword, as well as a ton of other weapons like this giant hammer. It's a lot more involved than the previous game, which amounted to simply pressing a button near enemies to automatically damage them. Honestly, when I heard the game would have a much more in-depth combat system, I was a little worried. The gameplay of the first game was so focused on that fluid, momentum-based movement, and the combat was, well, kind of an afterthought. But that was okay, because it did one thing really well: the platforming. In game design, it's almost a universal rule that the more systems and mechanics you try to add to a game, the more mediocre the overall package starts to become. Or, you just die before the game ever actually comes out. But somehow, the combat fits into Ori's gameplay beautifully, and adds a little extra danger to the fast-paced platforming of the first game. Your sword has a nice long reach, letting you poke at enemies with it as you dance around them with the bash. Or you can take out enemies from afar with the bow and its completely busted shard synergies. But if that sounds like a load of baby-back bullshit, you can grab this massive hammer and just smash through all of your enemies' shields. There are a surprising number of attack options. To be honest, I never really felt compelled to experiment much further beyond the light sword, heavy hammer, and ranged bow combo, but there are plenty of other options to experiment with. The whole game maintains this very delicate balance of fixing and improving things from the first game without fundamentally changing what worked. There are now even more collectibles to find scattered about, like the Gorlick ore to upgrade your hub, or spirit shards, which are like charms from Hollow Knight. These give you little effects and stat bonuses, like automatically pulling orbs to you, increasing your attack power, or making your arrows split off into multiple shots. These add even more variety to the combat, letting you turn yourself into a glass cannon, or making your bow completely overpowered. You start with only a few shard slots, and as you explore, you can find upgrades that increase your capacity. The manual checkpoints from the first game have been nixed in favor of an autosave. This was definitely one of the most unique aspects from Blind Forest, but I think it was a change for the better. Ori 2 utilizes a lot more buttons. The face buttons aside from the jump are all used to equip different abilities and attacks. Hey, kinda like the game I'm developing, you should go check that out. On top of that, this game has so many new weapons and items that utilize your energy meter, whereas Blind Forest's energy had relatively few uses. Forcing you to share all of your weapons' energy meters with your ability to save would have been kind of annoying. You've still got most of the core abilities from the first game, and while you don't start with all of them, you find them all fairly early on. So if you loved that bash ability like I did, you won't have to go without it for long. The power-ups ramp up even more quickly than in the first game. It really helps that you start with the wall jump ability this time. It just feels so integral to Ori's movement. Some of you might be disappointed that there aren't too many new movement abilities, as a lot of the new stuff you get is dedicated to combat. The most notable new ability is the grappling hook, which functions more like a hook shot that pulls you to a destination. There's also the swim dash and burrow, which both act as ways to rapidly traverse through water and sand, respectively. All of these new moves do one thing really well. They give you yet another way to zip through the world at breakneck speeds. Speaking of which, each area now has a spirit trial, which is essentially a time trial run through an often treacherous route. You can compete against a computer player ghost to earn some spirit light. You can even compete with your friends for a high score. It's a pretty nice touch. None of these are required, but they're the perfect opportunity to put your speedrunning chops to the test and earn some extra cash. In terms of level design, Will of the Wisps features even more tightly designed areas than its predecessor. These areas tend to revolve around a single concept, fleshed out to the absolute maximum. The Wellspring is all about these giant spinning water wheels. You'll grab onto them and spin around, releasing them at just the right moment to launch yourself through the air. There's also an entire section that takes place inside of this massive wheel that you rotate multiple times, shifting the whole layout each time you do so. Another clever one was this snowy area, which you can alter between a frozen and thawed state. Once thawed, you find that all these platforms and vines are actually plants that will try to eat you. They can also help you reach even further heights. The game also gives you a bit more freedom in the order that you choose to tackle these areas. Your path is relatively fixed for the first leg of the game, but then it leaves you to collect wisps in any order you choose. You can go to the Luma Pools, a beautiful water area, or Bower's Reach, or Moldwood Depths, or you could even start the Windswept Wastes. This extra bit of agency gives the game much more replayability. On my second playthrough, I was able to go through a completely different route. Unlike the first game, there are no ability points or skill trees to worry about. Instead, the spirit that you find acts as a generic currency to buy items, skills, and spirit shards from merchants. This new land has made some kind of sick and demented economy out of exploiting and trading the forest's literal soul. There's now a dedicated hub area with plenty of NPCs to converse with. You can even upgrade it as you progress through the game by planting seeds and discovering Gorlick ore. This does trade away a little bit of the isolationist nature of the first game. In Blind Forest, encounters with other creatures that didn't want to murder you were few and far between. In fact, now that I think about it, I'm not sure there was any spoken dialogue aside from the narration and your little helper. By contrast, Ori 2 has a ton of cute little NPCs to talk to, trade with, and even complete side quests for. The world feels a lot more alive in that regard. But if you think that means that Ori 2 is a friendlier and happier game, you'd be mistaken. Not all of these characters' stories get happy endings. In fact, the NPCs and dialogue are all used to full effect in selling just how dire the forest's decay has become. The overall story and tone are darker too. There are still plenty of uplifting moments, but the game is full of far more tragedy. If you felt touched by the fairy tale-like nature of the first game, you might feel gutted by the sequel's much more bittersweet narrative. And though I'm a sucker for picture-perfect happy endings, I'm glad that Moon Studios had the courage to tell a story that wasn't a complete rehash of the first game's formula. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a must-play Metroidvania. Everything from Blind Forest is dialed up a notch. The environments are more lush and beautiful. The soundtrack is an even stronger 1-2 punch of inspiring and foreboding. There are more areas to explore, and more freedom in how you choose to explore them. You've got more collectibles and abilities to discover than ever before. Ori 2 is the perfect sequel, in a genre with a surprisingly good track record for producing better sequels. And so, if you take away anything at all from this video, it's that all good Metroidvania sequels have grappling hooks. SteamWorld Dig, grappling hook. Guacamelee, gotta have a grappling hook. Ori, grappling hook. Mark my words, Silksong, grappling hook. Really what I'm trying to say here, guys, is you need to play this game, or else you'll regret it.